The studio lights dimmed just enough to catch the shimmer of Rasheeda's tear as it rolled down her cheek. Her voice trembled, breaking through the quiet air with a raw confession that no one expected. "I tried," she whispered, pausing to steady herself. "I really tried to save my marriage." The room froze. The host leaned forward, her eyes wide, unsure if she should comfort Rasheeda or let the moment breathe. Cameras zoomed in, catching every flicker of emotion on Rasheeda's face. What began as a simple interview had turned into a public unraveling of years of loyalty, heartbreak, and silent battles. For the first time, Rasheeda wasn't the composed businesswoman, the fashion mogul, or the unbothered queen fans had come to know. She was just a woman, sitting beneath blinding lights, holding back the pieces of a love story that had already slipped through her fingers. Producers backstage exchanged uneasy glances. Even the sound engineer hesitated before adjusting the mic volume, afraid to interrupt the silence that followed her words. As the cameras rolled, Rasheeda took a long breath and said, "You can fight for someone for years, but when they stop fighting for you, what's left?" The audience gasped. Social media erupted within minutes. Fans clipped the moment, posting it everywhere with captions like "She finally broke, and this is the realest thing Rasheeda ever said." Some sent words of support, others blamed Kirk, and a few wondered if this was all part of a storyline for the next season of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. But those who watched closely could tell this wasn't acting. Her eyes told the truth. The interviewer tried to guide her back, asking softly, "So when did you realize things were falling apart?" Rasheeda laughed bitterly, dabbing her tears with a tissue. "Maybe when I started defending him more than he defended me? Maybe when I kept forgiving things that kept happening over and over." She looked straight into the camera as if speaking to Kirk himself. "You can't build peace with someone who loves chaos." That sentence hit like thunder. Fans flooded the comment section. "Say it louder, Queen. Rasheeda deserves better. And this feels too real." Within hours, clips of the interview trended under hashtag #RASHEEDA, interview and hashtag #SaveHerPeace. But what viewers didn't know was that this emotional outburst was just the beginning. Behind the scenes, something much deeper was brewing, a confession she hadn't planned to make. A secret that could shatter the last image of her marriage. The producer's headset crackled. "Keep rolling," someone whispered. "Don't cut yet." Rasheeda's hand trembled as she reached for her water. She looked down, then up again, her eyes glossy but defiant. "People think I stayed because I was weak," she said slowly. "No. I stayed because I believed in the promise we made. But even promises expire when love dies." The studio fell silent again, and for a moment, no one dared to breathe. Outside, the world was already reacting. Fans were debating, blogs were spinning headlines, and Kirk's phone was lighting up nonstop. But inside that room, Rasheeda wasn't thinking about the noise. She was thinking about every argument that ended with tears, every night she waited for him to come home, and every lie she tried to forgive. This interview wasn't just a story, it was a goodbye disguised as an explanation. And before the cameras stopped rolling, she leaned forward and whispered one final line that would echo across social media for days. "Love didn't fail me. Loyalty did." Rasheeda sat there in that small Atlanta studio, the lights softer now, her makeup just barely holding through the quiet storm on her face. The interviewer didn't say anything for a while, and that silence seemed to stretch across every part of the room. Fans watching from home later said they could feel her pain through the screen. "This wasn't a performance," one viewer tweeted. "This was a cry from the heart." And truly, it was. For the first time in years, Rasheeda wasn't speaking as a brand, or as Kirk Frost's wife. She was speaking as a woman who had reached her breaking point. "You can forgive someone once," she began slowly, her voice shaking just enough to show how hard it was to keep steady. "You can forgive them twice. But when you start losing yourself in forgiveness, that's when you know love has turned into survival." Her eyes glistened as she spoke, each word heavy like it carried a decade of pain. "People think staying means strength, but sometimes it just means fear. Fear of what happens if you finally walk away." The interviewer nodded, almost afraid to interrupt, and the cameras zoomed closer. Every sigh, every blink, every tiny tremor in Rasheeda's lips became part of the story. A producer's voice quietly came through the headset, whispering, "We're live trending. Keep it rolling." Meanwhile, social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag pray for RASHEEDA and hashtag frostmarriage started climbing. Fans dug up old clips of Kirk's past controversies, resurfacing every rumor, every photo, every late-night club sighting that once made headlines. Some viewers wrote that they had never seen Rasheeda this open. Others accused the show of exploiting her heartbreak. But at that moment, it wasn't about fame, it was about the truth finally spilling out. Rasheeda inhaled deeply and whispered, "I loved him more than I loved myself." Those words lingered like smoke in the air. And that's the part that hurts the most. Because I kept choosing him even when he didn't choose me. I kept fighting for something that was already gone. The interviewer gently asked, "So what made you stay?" And Rasheeda smiled sadly, looking straight into the camera. "Hope," she said simply. "Hope that maybe he'd wake up one day and remember who we were. Hope that maybe all the nights I cried alone would mean something someday." The screen behind her played soft background clips of their earlier seasons together, the laughter, the family trips, the birthdays, the public reconciliations. Viewers could see the contrast between then and now. Back then, she smiled like she believed love could fix anything. Now, her face looked like it carried the weight of too many second chances. "We built everything together," she continued, "from the music to the business to the brand. But somewhere along the line, I started realizing that I was building alone. I'd look beside me, and he wasn't there. Not emotionally, not spiritually, just gone." The interviewer leaned forward. "Did he know how much it was hurting you?" Rasheeda laughed quietly, shaking her head. "Men always know. They just don't always care." Her voice cracked slightly. "And sometimes, it's not about cheating. Sometimes it's about disrespect. About the silence. About how they stop showing up even when they're standing right next to you." She paused, taking another deep breath before continuing. "He'd say, 'We good?' Like that fixed everything. But inside, I was drowning. And the worst part, I learned how to smile through it." Outside the studio, Kirk was reportedly watching the live feed from his phone. Pacing back and forth in his office at Frost Bistro, his manager kept saying, "You should call her. Bro. You should say something." But Kirk stayed quiet, eyes glued to the screen as Rasheeda's pain played out for the world to see. Fans online noticed that he hadn't posted anything. "Why is he silent?" one fan commented. "Silence speaks louder than denial." Meanwhile, inside the interview, Rasheeda finally let herself cry. She covered her face for a moment, whispering, "I never wanted people to see me like this, but I'm tired of pretending." The interviewer reached out, placing a hand on her arm. "You don't have to pretend anymore," she said softly. "You're allowed to break." Rasheeda nodded slowly. "Breaking doesn't mean I'm weak. It means I'm human. I gave my all to a man who forgot that I bleed too." A clip of that line spread like wildfire. Millions of views in just hours. Influencers reacted. Fans recorded emotional TikToks with captions like "She said what needed to be said." And this is every woman who ever stayed too long. But while fans were sympathizing, Kirk's camp reportedly went into damage control. Someone from his team tried to reach out to the producers, claiming the interview was edited for drama. But the raw footage showed otherwise. Nothing was scripted, no lines rehearsed. It was just a woman breaking her silence after years of protecting someone who stopped protecting her. The interviewer asked quietly, "What's next for you?" Rasheeda wiped her tears and gave a long exhale. "Healing," she said. "That's the only thing I want now. Healing for me, for my kids, even for him. Because when you carry hurt that long, it poisons everything around you. I can't keep living in pain just because I once loved the person who caused it." She looked up, her eyes clearing a little. "I want to find peace again, even if that peace doesn't include him." Those final words closed the segment, but producers hinted there was more. After the cameras cut, Rasheeda reportedly stayed behind, still crying softly. A crew member offered her a bottle of water. Another handed her a blanket. "You did the right thing," someone whispered. She nodded faintly, whispering back, "I just hope the truth sets me free." Outside, paparazzi were already waiting. Flash after flash caught her as she left the building, head low, sunglasses hiding her swollen eyes. Fans shouted her name, cheering for her strength. But behind that strength, there was exhaustion, years of it. As the car door closed and the cameras faded, Rasheeda leaned back in the seat, staring out the window. Atlanta looked different that night, colder, quieter, almost too still. Her phone buzzed nonstop, messages from friends, fellow cast members, even fans she'd never met. But one text stood out. It was from Kirk. 3 words. "We need talk." She stared at it for a long time before turning her phone face down. The driver asked softly, "Home, Miss?" She nodded. "Yeah," she whispered. "Take me home." But even she knew that the house waiting for her didn't feel like home anymore. And as her car disappeared into the Atlanta night, fans online kept replaying her final line, "Love didn't fail me. Loyalty did." It became a chant, a quote, a symbol of every woman who ever chose herself after being broken too many times. But what no one knew yet was that Rasheeda's story wasn't over. Because the next morning, when the world woke up, a new headline would shake everything again. The next morning started with a headline that spread like wildfire. Exclusive audio. A woman's voice confronts Kirk about midnight texts. The clip was only 19 seconds, shaky and muffled. But the voice sounded enough like Rasheeda to make fans believe it was real. A lot of people said it wasn't her. A lot of people said it was exactly her. Blogs posted slowed-down versions, filtered versions, even transcripts with question marks where the audio cracked. In the clip, the woman's voice said quietly, "I'm not your enemy. I'm your reminder." Then, over the sound of a door closing, a man's voice answered, "This isn't the time." The two words hardened the internet. Fans said the tone was cold, clipped, like somebody who'd already made up his mind. Commenters rushed in by the thousands. If that's Kirk, he'd been checked out. She begging for respect, and he telling her to chill. Nah, this ain't marriage, this is misery. The clip took on a life of its own. And for a few hours, the internet was a courtroom without a judge, a choir without a conductor, everyone singing the same hurt song in their own key. Inside her kitchen, Rasheeda stood at the counter with a cup of tea turning cold, staring at the screen like the phone might tell her how to feel. Her friend called, worried voice, gentle tone, "Do you want me to come over?" Rasheeda swallowed hard. "No, I'm okay. I'm just tired." But even she knew tired didn't cover it. Tired was after a long shoot day. This was the kind of ache that had lived in her bones for years. She opened her messages. There were notes from castmates, brand partners, cousins she hadn't seen in forever, people offering prayers, people recommending therapists and attorneys, people sending uplifting scriptures and messy memes all at once. She typed back thank you to some, heart emojis to others, silence to the ones she couldn't handle. Kirk finally texted again, but it wasn't an apology. "Let's meet at the office." 3 words like an appointment, not a lifeline. She stared at them and felt that familiar split inside. The one between the woman who still believed in the promise and the woman who just wanted peace. She typed, deleted, typed again. Finally she wrote, "Okay, noon." When she set the phone down, her hands were shaking. It wasn't fear of him, it was fear of what the truth might make her do. At Frost Bistro, the staff pretended everything was normal. Clinks of glass, clatters of plates, the low hum of a lunchtime crowd, and whispers that moved through the room like wind. "She's coming. You think it's about the interview. It gotta be." When Kirk walked in, he wore that careful face. The one he wore for payroll meetings, and tax conversations, and good speeches. He moved with the confidence of a man who could still control the room. But his eyes betrayed the worry of someone who couldn't control the story. He told his manager to cancel a supplier call. He told his barber he'd be late. He told himself this would blow over if he kept his voice low and his words shorter than his temper. Noon came and with it, that hush only real life can make. Rasheeda arrived in sunglasses and a hoodie, hair pulled back like she'd dressed for privacy and battle at the same time. They sat in his office with the door closed, blinds tilted, world shut out. The first minute was silence. The second minute was a breath. The third minute, she spoke. "You watched the interview. I saw parts. You saw enough." Kirk leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head like he was calming himself or bracing for a hit. "You said what you had to say. I said what I survived." He blinked, jaw tight. "We both survived." She looked straight at him, and it was the gaze of a woman who had outgrown the apology she never got. "Did we? Because I look at us and I see someone who rebuilt a house without checking if the foundation still wanted to hold us." She paused, her voice steadier now. "I kept loving a future that never showed up." "You knew what it was," he said softly, as if lowering his voice could lower her truth. "I knew what it was." She agreed, "and I kept pretending it was something else. That's on me." Then she tapped the phone screen and the leaked clip played. That same 19 seconds. The same fragile plea, the same cold answer. "This is our marriage now." Me reminding, "You postponing." Kirk rubbed his face and sighed. "That wasn't our worst. And that's the problem," she said. "Our worst shouldn't be normal." Outside the office, time thickened. Waiters walked slower, patrons leaned. Everyone was a detective without a badge. Blogs were already pushing a new alert. Source claims Kirk and Rasheeda meet privately after explosive interview. The headline gave fans something to chew on while they waited for the next clip, the next quote, the next wound to witness. Back inside, Rasheeda softened a little, just enough to let the girl inside her speak. "I needed you to love me louder than the lies. Not once. Not on camera. For real." Kirk finally let his shoulders drop. "I didn't protect you enough," he said. "I can admit that." Her mouth trembled. "You protected yourself from my disappointment. That's not the same as protecting me." He looked away, studying the calendar on the wall, like every date was a crime scene. What do you want me to do right now? Truth, she said, not a strategy. Truth, he hesitated, then nodded. I don't know if I can be the man you need. There it was. Small sentence, big earthquake. Her breath caught and she closed her eyes as tears built again. When she opened them, the room was the same, but nothing in it would ever feel familiar again. She stood. Then don't hold me where you won't heal me. Kirk stood too, palms open like he wanted to touch her and knew better. I never wanted to lose you. You lost me in rooms you never left, she answered. The door opened and closed with the softest click. Staff pretended to be busy. A cook wiped the same counter twice. A host arranged menus like they were rose petals. When Rasheeda walked through the dining room, phones were out but low, eyes were up but kind. A woman near the bar whispered, "We love you, sis." Rasheeda nodded, a quick grateful smile that didn't reach her eyes. Out on the sidewalk, she inhaled like Atlanta air could fill a ribcage cracked by the weight of loyalty. Her phone buzzed again. Another headline, another think piece. A DM from someone she used to call a friend, asking if she'd talk exclusively. She turned the screen off and looked at the sky. The weather didn't match her heart. Later that afternoon, the cast group chat lit up. One sent prayer hands. Another sent voice notes. One said they had tea if she was willing to sip. Another asked if this was a new storyline or the end of an old one. She didn't respond. Then a name popped up that made her pause. Yandi. The message was measured. Careful. Like someone who understood how to hold a friend's heart without squeezing it. You are not alone. 3 words, but unlike the ones Kirk sent, these felt like a blanket, not a summons. Rasheeda typed back, "Thank you." Then another message came from Carly, dramatic as always, but honest in that messy way only she could be. "Girl, when you're ready, we riding. I'll pull up in 5 minutes with lashes and lip gloss and a lawyer." Rasheeda laughed through tears at that, because sometimes humor is a bandage that keeps the wound from spilling everywhere. She didn't need a lawyer yet. She needed a mirror that told the truth. She took off the sunglasses and looked at herself in the car window. The soft reflection of a woman who'd held a whole empire on her back and still managed to smile for cameras and customers. She whispered, "I choose me." And the words didn't feel selfish. They felt overdue. That evening, the interview replayed on 3 networks and 8 blogs, each with commentary, analysis, and amateur lip. A podcaster paused on one frame, zooming into the way her fingers tightened around the tissue as she said the word promise. Another show brought on a relationship coach, who spoke in calm phrases like attachment injuries and repair attempts. The internet loves experts when love is bleeding. Meanwhile, Kirk posted a single black screen to his story with the words, "No one knows what happens in a home but the people who live in it." Immediately, the comments split. Some said, "Facts." Others said, "You hiding behind shadows." A few begged them to fix it in private. A few insisted that public pain needs public accountability. The family was left divided. The fans were shocked, and emotions ran high in every digital room. Late that night, Rasheeda sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling until the scrolling hurt. She stopped on a video from a fan, a teenage girl crying into her front camera. "I watched my mom do what you doing," the girl said. "I watched her stay until she didn't know her laugh anymore. Please don't let your laugh die." Rasheeda covered her mouth and let those words lay over her like a quilt. She made a choice. Not a press release. A choice, she called her mother. "Baby." Her mother answered with that knowing voice, the one that could hear tears even when they hid behind steady breaths. "I'm tired," Rasheeda said. "Then rest." Her mother replied. "Rest ain't quitting. Rest is choosing life." "Did I fail my marriage?" "No," her mother said, firm. "You lived it. That's not failure. That's living. Sometimes living changes shape." They talked for an hour about small things and large wounds. When they hung up, the silence felt kinder. The house wasn't home yet, but it wasn't a battlefield either. She walked to the closet and pulled down a box of old photos, the early days. Heady and simple, smiles that didn't have to fight their way onto their faces. She looked at a younger version of herself, eyes glittering with belief, and she didn't pity that girl. She thanked her for holding the dream long enough for a wiser woman to put it down gently. Around midnight, a new leak hit the blogs. Alleged screenshots of calendar invites, studio sessions, restaurant receipts, late-night Uber logs. None of it proved anything. All of it suggested everything. Fans argued over the pixels. That font is fake. That timestamp doesn't match. The math adds up. The math is mathing too hard. But one thing cut through the noise. Someone wanted this to get uglier. Someone wanted spectacle, not healing. Rasheeda turned her phone off and let the darkness be dark. No blue glow, no chime, no chorus, just her breath in and out. Morning came again, lighter than the last. She brewed coffee and didn't drink it. She opened the windows and listened to a bird that didn't know fame or heartbreak, just sunrise. Then she grabbed a small overnight bag and put in exactly what she needed. 2 changes of clothes, a face wash that didn't irritate her skin, a silk bonnet, and a book she'd meant to start. She texted Yandy. "I'm going to disappear for a day." Yandy replied, "Good. Disappear into yourself." She texted Kirk, "I need space to think." He wrote back, "Do what you need." It wasn't romance. It was permission shaped like resignation. On the drive out of the city, Atlanta felt different again, but this time the difference was Hope wearing sneakers. She played music that wasn't tied to any memory of him, humming off-key like a girl rediscovering her mouth. She checked into a quiet boutique hotel under a name that only her assistant knew, and when she walked into the room, the soft hotel sheets looked like they had been waiting for her to stop carrying the weight of a whole narrative on her shoulders. She slept. No dreams, no edits, no confessional chair. Just sleep that began at the hairline and moved down to the toes. A full body yes to rest. When she woke up, the world was still loud, but inside, something was quieting. She ordered oatmeal and berries from room service and ate without checking her phone. She stood on the balcony and let the morning air remind her that she was alive outside of a storyline. Then the phone buzzed on the nightstand with a new message from a number saved simply as attorney. Not because she'd made a decision, because smart is not the enemy of heart. "If you need information, I can provide it," the message read. No pressure. Just facts. She stared at the words and felt the difference between drama and detail. Detail was a map. Drama was a maze. For the first time in a long time, she wanted a map. She typed, "Send me a summary of my options. I'm not saying yes. I just need to know." She hit send and felt the floor under her feet become a little more solid, as if questions themselves can build a bridge when answers are too heavy to carry today. While she waited, she opened the Notes app and wrote a single sentence, "I won't let pain narrate my life." She read it twice, then added another line, "I will let truth narrate my healing." The words weren't for the internet. They were for the mirror, for the girl in the photo box, for the woman on the balcony choosing to breathe. And as her phone buzzed again, a soft chime announcing the attorney's document. A careful layout of choices and consequences. She felt ready not to decide, but to keep walking, because the next call would not be from a blogger or a brand. It would be from someone whose voice could steady the wind inside her. And when that call came, when she answered and heard the quiet courage on the other end, part of her knew the road she was on wasn't away from love, it was toward herself. And the next step would challenge everything she thought she knew about forgiveness, family, and the kind of ending that looks like a beginning with different lighting. Later that afternoon, while the internet still buzzed with half-truths and fan theories, Rasheeda checked out of the hotel. She wore no makeup, just a plain black hoodie and shades that covered most of her tired face. She didn't want to be seen, but fate has a cruel way of shining cameras right where pain lives. A paparazzo caught her walking out with her overnight bag, and within an hour, photos of her looking broken spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed things like "Rasheeda spotted alone after emotional breakdown" and "Kirk nowhere in sight." The comments split, as always, half sympathy, half judgment, and all noise. Back at Frost Bistro, Kirk scrolled through those same images. His jaw tightened as he read the comments. One said, "This man let a queen walk away." Another said, "He'll regret it when she finally glows without him." His manager tried to speak, but Kirk waved him off. He'd seen enough. Maybe for the first time, he wasn't angry at the press. He was angry at himself. Still, pride is a heavy habit. Instead of calling her, he sent a message. "Let's talk before this gets worse." No apology, no softness, just damage control disguised as concern. When Rasheeda saw the text, she stared at it for a full minute. She could almost hear his voice behind the words, the same tone he used every time he wanted to patch things without fixing them. She put her phone face down, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was gray, the kind of gray that makes you want to start over. She whispered to herself, "I've already talked enough." And for the first time, she didn't respond. But silence doesn't stop rumors. By evening, bloggers were claiming that Rasheeda had moved out and filed for separation. None of it was confirmed, but confirmation didn't matter anymore. People wanted a headline more than the truth. One gossip page even leaked a blurry image of what looked like a legal document with her name on it. But it turned out to be an old business license. Still, the lie ran faster than the fact. That night, she sat in her living room, surrounded by half-packed boxers. Not because she was leaving, but because she'd started cleaning out the memories that hurt to look at. The matching mugs, the framed photo from their vow renewal, the anniversary card that said forever. Forever had turned into 4 now, and now was all she could handle. She poured herself a glass of water and turned on the TV. And there it was, again, her face on every entertainment channel. The same clip, the same tears, the same soundbite. Love didn't fail me, loyalty did. The segment cut to panel discussion mode. A host in a bright suit said, "It's brave what Rasheeda's doing. But do we think this is the end or another Frost family reboot?" Another host laughed. "They always bounce back. Give it 2 episodes." The audience chuckled, but the sound felt cruel. Rasheeda muted the TV and leaned back. She thought of all the times she'd forgiven for the sake of the brand. How many moments she'd swallowed so the public wouldn't eat her alive. She whispered, "This time, it's not for the cameras." Just then, her phone buzzed. It was an incoming call-unknown number. She hesitated but answered. "Hello." A familiar voice replied, soft but steady. "It's Jasmine." The air thickened instantly. Jasmine Washington. The name alone carried years of unfinished business, whispered apologies, and public wounds. Rasheeda froze. "Why are you calling me?" Jasmine took a breath. "Because I saw the interview. And I know what that pain looks like. I've lived it too." Rasheeda almost hung up, but something about Jasmine's tone stopped her. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. Jasmine replied, "Just to say, I'm sorry. Not for everything. I know sorry can't fix the past, but watching you cry made me realize how much we all lost to this man's mistakes. I'm not your enemy anymore." The line went quiet for a second. Rasheeda's throat tightened, and though she didn't respond, a small part of her wanted to believe Jasmine's words. "I appreciate that," she finally said. "But healing ain't a group project. I have to do this my way." Jasmine whispered, "I understand." And the call ended just like that, 2 women finally standing on opposite sides of peace. Later that night, Rasheeda opened Instagram and posted a single photo, a candle burning in a glass holder, captioned "Letting go with grace." Within minutes, the comments flooded. "Queen energy. So proud of you. Light attracts peace." But among thousands of messages, one stood out. It was from Yandi. "Healing looks good on you. Keep going." Rasheeda smiled faintly and replied with a heart emoji. But while fans celebrated her strength, Kirk was planning his next move. Early the next morning, he contacted one of the producers from Love and Hip Hop and said, "We need to control the narrative." The producer sighed. "Kirk, this isn't a storyline anymore. This is your life." Kirk shot back, "Then we'll tell it our way." Within hours, the show's team began reaching out to Rasheeda's publicist, pitching a raw sit-down reunion to address everything. But Rasheeda didn't respond. Instead, she took her sons to breakfast and left her phone in the car. For once, she wanted to be just mom, not a headline, not a wife, not a survivor, just mom. The paparazzi found her anyway. One blurry photo showed her laughing with her kids, the kind of real smile fans hadn't seen in months. The picture went viral, captioned "Rasheeda finds her joy again." It became a trending meme overnight, with fans quoting, "This is what healing looks like." Even those who once doubted her began rooting for her peace. Meanwhile, Kirk watched from the shadows, scrolling through comments that read like confessions. "She deserves better." He fumbled, "A legend. Sometimes losing her is the lesson." For the first time, the applause wasn't for him. It was for her. And deep down, he knew that was a kind of punishment pride couldn't survive. As night fell, he sat alone at Frost Bistro, staring at the same table where they'd once laughed over business plans and anniversary dinners. The music played low. The staff kept their distance. His phone lit up with a new message, her name. For a brief second, his heart lifted, but when he opened it, the words were simple. "Please stop calling the producers. This isn't about ratings anymore. It's about peace. Let it be." He typed back a dozen replies but deleted every one. Finally, he just wrote, "I understand." It wasn't much, but for once, it was honest. That night, Atlanta felt different again. Quieter, almost reverent, as if even the city knew something sacred had ended. Fans still debated, blogs still speculated, and the cameras still hunted for the next shot. But behind closed doors, Rasheeda finally slept without replaying the pain. For the first time in years, she dreamed not of what she lost but of what she was becoming. And somewhere in that dream, the laughter she thought she'd buried found its way back. It was soft, it was new, and it was hers. The following morning, sunlight slipped across her bedroom walls like it was trying to wake her gently. Rasheeda blinked against it, the warmth of the light reminding her that even after the ugliest nights, the world still insisted on starting over. She stayed in bed a while, the quiet almost strange after weeks of noise. No phones buzzing, no cameras, no producers waiting for her to say the next quote that would trend. She got up, made coffee, and turned on some old music, one of the early Frost records before everything got complicated. Her own voice filled the room. Young, bold, still sure that love was enough. She smiled, half sad, half proud. That girl had no idea. She murmured. Her assistant called mid. You've got offers coming in, she said. Daytime shows, podcasts, even a docuseries pitch. Rasheeda sighed. I'm not ready to turn pain into content. Understood, the assistant replied softly. Just thought you should know. Rasheeda thanked her, then hung up and scrolled through her messages. Among the hundreds of unread ones, one caught her eye. It was from Mendy. Heard what's going on? Stay strong. You've been the glue for too long. Now be the gold. She smiled faintly. The people who'd lived through the same kind of chaos understood without needing to say much. Around noon, she decided to go for a walk. No glam, no entourage, just a woman in sneakers and sunglasses moving through the city that had watched her rise and unravel. Fans spotted her, whispered, but didn't intrude. One woman approached quietly, tears in her eyes. You helped me leave my own Kirk, she said, voice trembling. Rasheeda hugged her without hesitation. You did that yourself, she whispered back. And somehow, that moment meant more than any camera flash or applause. But peace never stays simple in Atlanta. By afternoon, a gossip site dropped what they called an exclusive interview with a so-called friend of Kirk. The anonymous voice claimed that Rasheeda's emotional interview was partly rehearsed, that she knew what she was doing and was trying to rebrand herself as a victim. The headline screamed betrayal, and the story lit up every platform. Comments flooded with fury and defense. How dare they drag her through this again? She's manipulating the media. No, she's surviving. The digital storm returned full force. And even though she'd promised herself not to look, Rasheeda found herself scrolling, eyes burning with disbelief. Her phone rang again. Yandi this time. Girl, don't feed that mess, Yandi said, her voice steady but fierce. They're throwing dirt 'cause you started blooming. Rasheeda exhaled sharply. I know, but it hurts, Yandi. It's like they don't want me to heal unless it benefits them. Yandi replied. That's exactly why you gotta heal louder. Not for them, but in spite of them. Those words landed deep. Rasheeda wiped her face, squared her shoulders, and said, You're right, I've been quiet too long. That evening, she went live on Instagram. No glam squad, no background music, no script. Just her sitting on her couch in a hoodie. Over 200,000 people joined within minutes. She took a deep breath and said, I know y'all seen what's being said. I'm not here to clap back or clear anything up. I'm just here to say that healing doesn't mean silence. It means choosing peace, even when people want chaos. She paused, the comment feed flying so fast it looked like rain. Some folks want me to break. Some want me to beg. I'm doing neither. I'm building. The comments erupted. Queen behavior. We love you. This is the realest live ever. Kirk's name flooded the chat too, but she didn't flinch. She kept her tone calm. I ain't perfect. I've made mistakes. But I never stopped loving right. And that's what keeps me going. She smiled softly at the screen. Thank you for loving me when I didn't even love myself. Then she ended the live. No dramatic outro, just a simple wave and a quiet goodnight. Across town, Kirk watched it from his office. No sound, just her face moving through the pixels. He rubbed his hands over his head and whispered to himself. She done. It wasn't anger, it was realization. He knew that tone, that peace. It was the same tone she had the night before they opened Frost Bistro, when she said, This time, it's gonna work. Only now, the words meant her freedom, not their business. He stood up, walked out to the balcony, and looked over the city lights. Somewhere below, cameras still flashed, cars still moved, and life refused to pause for regret. Later that night, he picked up his phone and recorded a voice note. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I just want to say I'm sorry. For real this time. Not for the show, not for the fans. For you. He never sent it. He saved it, listened to it once, then deleted it. Meanwhile, Rasheeda was writing in her journal. Something she hadn't done in years. Today I realized forgiveness ain't always reconciliation, she wrote. Sometimes it's just peace with the fact that you tried. She closed the notebook, placed it beside her bed, and turned off the lamp. But somewhere in the night, her phone lit up again. A notification from a news outlet. Rumor: Kirk Frost planning a public apology event. She rolled her eyes and whispered, "They'll make a storyline out of my silence if I let them." But then she thought of her fans, the ones who'd sent love, prayers, and stories of survival, and she knew she owed them honesty, not spectacle. The next morning, she reached out to a trusted producer and said, "If they want the truth, they'll get it, but it'll be on my terms." The producer hesitated. "You sure?" She nodded. "Yes. No drama. No background music. Just me. One camera. One take." Plans started quietly forming for a raw sit-down. Not with love and hip-hop. Not with gossip blogs. But on her own YouTube channel, her voice, her edit, her story. While the internet speculated and Kirk's team strategized, she was reclaiming the narrative piece by piece. And as she walked through her boutique that afternoon, greeting her staff, smiling at customers, she realized she didn't feel broken anymore. She felt awake, the kind of awake that comes after years of living half asleep in somebody else's storm. The cameras might still chase her, but for once, she wasn't running from anything. She was walking toward herself. And this time, every step was hers alone. The studio smelled like vanilla candles and calm, intentional, quiet, everything Rasheeda had asked for. No flashy backdrop, no logo wall, no neon lights spelling her name. Just her, a soft beige sofa, and one camera. The producer adjusted the mic and asked, "You sure you want to do this with no edit points?" Rasheeda nodded slowly. "If it's truth, it doesn't need cuts." They rolled sound. A red light blinked. She looked into the lens, her voice steady but low. "A lot's been said these last few weeks," she began. "Some true, some twisted, some just noise. I don't want to fight rumors anymore. I just want to tell my truth. Plain." She paused, letting the silence work for her. "When I said I tried to save my marriage, I meant it. But I learned something: love don't survive where respect keeps dying. And I've been resuscitating something that flatlined years ago." Fans watching later would describe the moment as raw. No mascara, no filters, just her face and that unflinching honesty. "People think heartbreak makes you bitter," she continued, eyes glistening. "But what it really does is make you honest. I've spent years smiling through pain, forgiving on camera, pretending off it. Now I'm choosing peace, not performance." She reached for a tissue, dabbed her eyes lightly, but kept speaking. "This ain't to bash Kirk. He's got his journey. I've got mine. I just want to close this chapter with truth instead of tears." As the shoot went on, her tone shifted from sadness to clarity. "I used to measure strength by how much I could endure. Now I measure it by how much I refuse to." She leaned forward, almost whispering, "You can love someone and still walk away. That don't make you weak, it makes you free." Backstage, even the cameraman looked moved. The producer mouthed, "Keep rolling." 20 minutes in, she smiled faintly. "There's no villain in my story anymore. There's just lessons." She took a breath. "And maybe the biggest one is that loyalty should never cost you your peace." After the recording, she sat in stillness for a long moment, letting the weight of it settle. The producer asked quietly, "Do you want to review it before we upload?" She shook her head. "No edits? Post it exactly as it is." By evening, the video went live on her personal channel, titled My Truth, Uncut. Within hours, it exploded. 1 million views in less than a day. Comments filled with love, empathy, and reflection. "This woman is pure grace. I felt every word. She just changed the definition of strength." Fans tagged each other with broken heart emojis and hashtag #RASHEEDA truth trended globally. Even major outlets shared clips, calling it the most honest moment reality TV has ever birthed off-screen. Meanwhile, Kirk watched the entire thing in silence. He didn't pause, didn't scroll, didn't look away. At one point, his eyes welled up, but he didn't wipe them. When it ended, he whispered, "You won." Not out of bitterness, so out of understanding. He knew she hadn't won against him, she'd won against the cycle. Later that night, he posted a single message on Instagram. "I owe a lot of apologies, starting with her." No tags, no explanation, just a black background and white text. The comments filled with shock. Is this real growth or damage control? Maybe it's too late, but at least he owned it. Men don't usually say that. Respect. Rasheeda saw it, smiled sadly, and closed the app. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't even waiting for an apology. Forgiveness had already happened quietly, long before he wrote it. She whispered, "Thank you, God," then turned her phone face down and let the quiet fill the room. The next morning, she met Yandi and Carly for brunch at a quiet spot uptown. Cameras weren't allowed there, and that was the point. "Girl, you broke the internet again," Carly teased, sliding into the booth. Rasheeda laughed softly. "I wasn't trying to." Yandi sipped her mimosa and said, "That's why it worked." It was real. They talked about work, kids, new projects, and life after pain. For the first time in months, Rasheeda felt light. Not perfect, not healed completely, but light like someone who'd dropped 1,000 invisible pounds. Halfway through brunch, she got a text from her eldest son. "Proud of you, Mom." She smiled so hard she almost cried. "That right there," she said to her friends, holding up the phone. "That's what matters." As the afternoon faded, they walked out together, laughing like women who had seen too much and still found reasons to smile. The world might still whisper, speculate, and twist stories, but Rasheeda had something they couldn't touch anymore: peace that wasn't performative. And somewhere inside that calm, a thought bloomed quietly. Maybe this wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was the rebirth, because sometimes the real power isn't in saving a marriage, it's in saving yourself. That evening, the city glowed with its usual noise: traffic hums, neon signs, the faint echo of laughter from nearby patios. But Rasheeda's house was quiet. She'd spent the day turning off the outside world, one notification at a time. The new video had crossed 5 million views, and every outlet was calling it the turning point. But she didn't care about numbers. For the first time in years, she cared only about stillness. She lit a candle, poured herself a glass of water, and looked around the house that once echoed with arguments, apologies, and long silences. Now, it just felt like hers again. On the kitchen counter sat a bouquet of white lilies with no card. She knew who they were from. Kirk never sent flowers during the chaos, only after. She stood there for a moment, then moved the bouquet to the corner table, where the light didn't hit as much. She didn't throw them away, but she didn't center them either. Her phone buzzed. This time, it was a message from Jasmine again. "Saw your video. Proud of you. No drama, just truth. It made me rethink a lot." Rasheeda hesitated, then typed back, "Thank you. We all learning." She stared at that sentence for a long moment before hitting send. Years ago, she would have deleted it, too proud to show grace. But the new her understood that peace sometimes starts with small kindnesses. Meanwhile, Kirk was sitting in his car, outside Frost Bistro. Phone in hand, scrolling through comments he both wanted and hated to read. One said, Kirk should let her go in peace. Another read, if he really loves her, he'll stop showing up in her story. He locked his phone and stared out the window. The restaurant sign flickered faintly, like even it was tired. For the first time in years, he didn't think about image or business. He thought about the woman who once believed in him so fiercely that she forgot herself, and how she finally remembered. The next morning, Rasheeda woke to sunlight and the sound of her son laughing downstairs. The house smelled like pancakes and syrup, normal, peaceful, almost unfamiliar in its simplicity. She walked down barefoot, smiled at the sight of her kids cooking, and said, "Who told y'all you could take over my kitchen?" Her youngest grinned. "You needed breakfast, Mom." Her heart swelled. "Yeah," she said softly, "I did." After breakfast, she sat on the porch, scrolling through fan messages that were more like love letters than comments. One read, "You made me believe that it's okay to start over." Another said, "You're teaching us what healing looks like." She replied to a few, liking more than she could count. Each word of encouragement felt like a thread, stitching her back together one line at a time. Around noon, a call came from a TV producer, this time not from Love and Hip Hop, but a major talk show. "We'd love for you to come and speak about your journey. No drama, just woman to woman." Rasheeda paused. "I'll think about it." The producer said, "Take your time. The door's open." After she hung up, she smiled to herself. The world was finally inviting her for her story, not her scandal. That night, she met Yandi again for dinner, this time at a rooftop spot overlooking the city. The air was warm, the lights soft, the music low. "You good?" Yandi asked, studying her face. "Yeah," Rasheeda said. "I'm finally good." Yandi grinned. "So, what's next for you?" Rasheeda thought for a moment. "Peace first, then maybe purpose. Maybe I'll do something that helps other women speak up before it's too late." Yandi raised her glass. To that, as they toasted, a few fans noticed her and waved from a distance. She waved back, not as a celebrity, but as someone who had survived enough to earn her calm. Later, she posted a photo from the dinner, a candid shot, her laughing mid-sentence with the caption, "The glow hits different when it's real." Within minutes, it flooded timelines again. Carly commented, "You glowing like peace is expensive." Yandi wrote, "It is." And Kirk, quietly, just left a single word: respect. It was the most human thing he'd said in months. No drama. No performance. Just truth in lowercase. Rasheeda saw it, didn't reply, but smiled faintly. It wasn't reconciliation. It was recognition. As the night wore on, she sat by her window, the city lights twinkling like forgiveness scattered across the horizon. She thought about every version of herself: the wife, the friend, the fighter, the forgiver, and realized they had all led her here. Not broken, not bitter, just real. In that silence, she whispered, "I made it." And for the first time in years, she believed it completely. But just as she was about to close her eyes, her phone buzzed again, an email notification. Subject line: exclusive invitation, women who rebuild. It was an event for influential women who had turned pain into power. The sender wrote, "We'd love for you to share your story." She smiled, closed her eyes for a moment, then whispered, "Maybe it's time." Because for Rasheeda, the tears had already done their work. The world had seen her break, but now, they were about to witness her rise, and this time, it wouldn't be for the show. It would be for herself. A week later, Atlanta felt lighter. Spring air drifted through open windows, and the sound of construction on a new boutique down the street echoed faintly through the mornings. Rasheeda had been spending her days quietly, working on her business, focusing on family, and journaling more than she had in years. But something had shifted in her spirit. She no longer moved like a woman carrying old battles. She moved like someone building piece brick by brick. One afternoon, she sat with her manager reviewing a new proposal. "They want you to headline the Women Who Rebuild event next month," he said, sliding the email across the table. "Keynote speaker. They're paying well too." Rasheeda smiled faintly. "It's not about the check," she said. "It's about the message." He nodded. "Then this is your moment." She exhaled softly, tracing her finger over the printed invite. "No, this is my healing in public." The event was set for a Saturday in downtown Atlanta. The night before, Rasheeda stood in front of her mirror, rehearsing lines, not a speech, just words from her heart. "You can't pour into others from an empty cup," she said, watching her reflection. "But once you fill your own, the overflow changes lives." She smiled. That would be her opening. The next morning, she dressed simply. Cream suit, soft gold earrings. No dramatics. When she arrived, the room was packed with women from all walks of. "I refuse to." She leaned forward, almost whispering, "You can love someone and still walk away. That don't make you weak, it makes you free." Backstage, even the cameraman looked moved. The producer mouthed, "Keep rolling." 20 minutes in, she smiled faintly. "There's no villain in my story anymore. There's just lessons." She took a breath. And maybe the biggest one is that loyalty should never cost you your peace. After the recording, she sat in stillness for a long moment, letting the weight of it settle. The producer asked quietly, "Do you want to review it before we upload?" She shook her head. "No edits. Post it exactly as it is." By evening, the video went live on her personal channel, titled My Truth, Uncut. Within hours, it exploded. 1 million views in less than a day. Comments filled with love, empathy, and reflection. "This woman is pure grace. I felt every word. She just changed the definition of strength." Fans tagged each other with broken heart emojis, and hashtag #RASHEEDA Truth trended globally. Even major outlets shared clips, calling it the most honest moment reality TV has ever birthed off-screen. Meanwhile, Kirk watched the entire thing in silence. He didn't pause, didn't scroll, didn't look away. At one point, his eyes welled up, but he didn't wipe them. When it ended, he whispered, "You won." Not out of bitterness, so out of understanding. He knew she hadn't won against him, she'd won against the cycle. Later that night, he posted a single message on Instagram. "I owe a lot of apologies, starting with her." No tags, no explanation, just a black background and white text. The comments filled with shock. Is this real growth or damage control? Maybe it's too late, but at least he owned it. Men don't usually say that. Respect. Rasheeda saw it, smiled sadly, and closed the app. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't even waiting for an apology. Forgiveness had already happened quietly, long before he wrote it. She whispered, "Thank you, God," then turned her phone face down and let the quiet fill the room. The next morning, she met Yandy and Carly for brunch at a quiet spot uptown. Cameras weren't allowed there, and that was the point. "Girl, you broke the internet again," Carly teased, sliding into the booth. Rasheeda laughed softly. "I wasn't trying to." Yandy sipped her mimosa and said, "That's why it worked." It was real. They talked about work, kids, new projects, and life after pain. For the first time in months, Rasheeda felt light. Not perfect, not healed completely, but light like someone who'd dropped 1,000 invisible pounds. Halfway through brunch, she got a text from her eldest son. "Proud of you, Mom." She smiled so hard she almost cried. "That right there," she said to her friends, holding up the phone. "That's what matters." As the afternoon faded, they walked out together, laughing like women who had seen too much and still found reasons to smile. The world might still whisper, speculate, and twist stories, but Rasheeda had something they couldn't touch anymore: peace that wasn't performative. And somewhere inside that calm, a thought bloomed quietly. Maybe this wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was the rebirth, because sometimes the real power isn't in saving a marriage, it's in saving yourself. That evening, the city glowed with its usual noise: traffic hums, neon signs, the faint echo of laughter from nearby patios. But Rasheeda's house was quiet. She'd spent the day turning off the outside world, one notification at a time. The new video had crossed 5 million views, and every outlet was calling it the turning point. But she didn't care about numbers. For the first time in years, she cared only about stillness. She lit a candle, poured herself a glass of water, and looked around the house that once echoed with arguments, apologies, and long silences. Now, it just felt like hers again. On the kitchen counter sat a bouquet of white lilies with no card. She knew who they were from. Kirk never sent flowers during the chaos only. After, she stood there for a moment, then moved the bouquet to the corner table, where the light didn't hit as much. She didn't throw them away, but she didn't center them either. Her phone buzzed. This time, it was a message from Jasmine again. "Saw your video. Proud of you. No drama, just truth. It made me rethink a lot." Rasheeda hesitated, then typed back, "Thank you. We all learning." She stared at that sentence for a long moment before hitting send. Years ago, she would have deleted it, too proud to show grace. But the new her understood that peace sometimes starts with small kindnesses. Meanwhile, Kirk was sitting in his car, outside Frost Bistro. Phone in hand, scrolling through comments he both wanted and hated to read. One said, "Kirk should let her go in peace." Another read, "If he really loves her, he'll stop showing up in her story." He locked his phone and stared out the window. The restaurant sign flickered faintly, like even it was tired. For the first time in years, he didn't think about image or business. He thought about the woman who once believed in him so fiercely that she forgot herself, and how she finally remembered. The next morning, Rasheeda woke to sunlight and the sound of her son laughing downstairs. The house smelled like pancakes and syrup, normal, peaceful, almost unfamiliar in its simplicity. She walked down barefoot, smiled at the sight of her kids cooking, and said, "Who told y'all you could take over my kitchen?" Her youngest grinned. "You needed breakfast, Mom." Her heart swelled. "Yeah," she said softly, "I did." After breakfast, she sat on the porch, scrolling through fan messages that were more like love letters than comments. One read, "You made me believe that it's okay to start over." Another said, "You're teaching us what healing looks like." She replied to a few, liking more than she could count. Each word of encouragement felt like a thread, stitching her back together one line at a time. Around noon, a call came from a TV producer, this time not from Love and Hip Hop, but a major talk show. "We'd love for you to come and speak about your journey. No drama, just woman to woman." Rasheeda paused. "I'll think about it." The producer said, "Take your time. The door's open." After she hung up, she smiled to herself. The world was finally inviting her for her story, not her scandal. That night, she met Yandi again for dinner, this time at a rooftop spot overlooking the city. The air was warm, the lights soft, the music low. "You good?" Yandi asked, studying her face. "Yeah," Rasheeda said. "I'm finally good." Yandi grinned. "So, what's next for you?" Rasheeda thought for a moment. "Peace first, then maybe purpose. Maybe I'll do something that helps other women speak up before it's too late." Yandi raised her glass. To that, as they toasted, a few fans noticed her and waved from a distance. She waved back, not as a celebrity, but as someone who had survived enough to earn her calm. Later, she posted a photo from the dinner, a candid shot, her laughing mid-sentence with the caption, "The glow hits different when it's real." Within minutes, it flooded timelines again. Carly commented, "You glowing like peace is expensive." Yandi wrote, "It is," and Kirk, quietly, just left a single word, "Respect." It was the most human thing he'd said in months. No drama, no performance, just truth in lowercase. Rasheeda saw it, didn't reply, but smiled faintly. It wasn't reconciliation, it was recognition. As the night wore on, she sat by her window, the city lights twinkling like forgiveness scattered across the horizon. She thought about every version of herself: the wife, the friend, the fighter, the forgiver, and realized they had all led her here. Not broken, not bitter, just real. In that silence, she whispered, "I made it." And for the first time in years, she believed it completely. But just as she was about to close her eyes, her phone buzzed again, an email notification. Subject line: Exclusive invitation, women who rebuild. It was an event for influential women who had turned pain into power. The sender wrote, "We'd love for you to share your story." She smiled, closed her eyes for a moment, then whispered, "Maybe it's time." Because for Rasheeda, the tears had already done their work. The world had seen her break, but now, they were about to witness her rise, and this time, it wouldn't be for the show. It would be for herself. A week later, Atlanta felt lighter. Spring air drifted through open windows, and the sound of construction on a new boutique down the street echoed faintly through the mornings. Rasheeda had been spending her days quietly, working on her business, focusing on family, and journaling more than she had in years. But something had shifted in her spirit. She no longer moved like a woman carrying old battles. She moved like someone building piece brick by brick. One afternoon, she sat with her manager reviewing a new proposal. "They want you to headline the Women Who Rebuild event next month," he said, sliding the email across the table. "Keynote speaker. They're paying well too." Rasheeda smiled faintly. "It's not about the check," she said. "It's about the message." He nodded. "Then this is your moment." She exhaled softly, tracing her finger over the printed invite. "No, this is my healing in public." The event was set for a Saturday in downtown Atlanta. The night before, Rasheeda stood in front of her mirror rehearsing lines, not a speech, just words from her heart. "You can't pour into others from an empty cup," she said, watching her reflection. "But once you fill your own, the overflow changes lives." She smiled. That would be her opening. The next morning, she dressed simply. Cream suit, soft gold earrings. No dramatics. When she arrived, the room was packed with women from all walks of life: entrepreneurs, artists, mothers, survivors. The crowd buzzed when they saw her, not with the wild energy of celebrity gossip, but with quiet respect. She stepped onto the stage, took the mic, and waited for the noise to fade. "Thank you," she said gently. "A year ago, I wouldn't have been able to stand here without breaking down, but today, I'm standing not as a brand, not as somebody's wife, not as a headline, but as me." Applause rippled through the room. When you've been through pain that's been public, healing has to be private first. I learned that the hard way, but I also learned something else: peace is not given, you build it. The crowd leaned in. Her tone was calm, steady, the kind that comes from survival, not performance. "I was scared to tell my truth because I thought it made me look weak. But truth don't weaken you, it purifies you. And once you tell it, nobody can use it against you again." A few women in the front row wiped tears. "We all got our Kirk moments," she continued softly. "Maybe yours ain't a marriage. Maybe it's a friendship, a job, a situation that made you forget who you are. But you can always choose yourself again." The standing ovation was thunderous, but Rasheeda just smiled humbly, whispering, "Thank you." Later, backstage, the event organizer hugged her tightly. "You have no idea what you just did for these women," she said. "You reminded them that strength don't always shout." Hours later, as she walked to her car, she found Kirk waiting near the parking entrance. No cameras, no entourage, just him. She froze for a second, then approached slowly. "You here for the event?" she asked carefully. "I saw clips online," he said. "You were incredible." She nodded. "Thank you." The silence between them was no longer hostile, it was human. "I'm happy for you," Kirk said quietly. "I mean that." She looked at him for a long moment. "I believe you," she said, and for once, she did. "You doing okay?" he asked. "I'm learning," she replied. "And you?" "Trying," he said with a faint smile. "One day at a time." She nodded. "That's all any of us can do." They stood there for a few seconds, two people who had once shared everything and were now just sharing peace. No tears, no blame, just closure in its cleanest form. As she turned to leave, he called out Rasheeda. She looked back. "Yeah." He hesitated. "Thank you for letting me grow from your pain." Her eyes softened. "Then make it worth it." She smiled once more and walked away. That night, she sat on her balcony, city lights flickering below, her speech replaying in her mind. The comments online were overwhelming, thousands of women thanking her for giving them the courage to start over. Her inbox was full of partnership offers, brand collaborations, and speaking requests. But none of that mattered as much as the quiet peace sitting in her chest. She picked up her journal again and wrote, "I finally understand why storms come, they clear paths, not lives." Then below that, she wrote one last sentence. "I tried to save my marriage, but God used it to save me. She closed the notebook, smiled through a single tear, and leaned back in her chair as the night wind brushed against her face. The city kept moving. The world kept talking, but for once, Rasheeda didn't need to say anything. She'd already told her truth, and it was enough. In the distance, a billboard lit up advertising the upcoming Love and Hip Hop Atlanta reunion. Her face wasn't on it this time, and that, too, was peace. 2 months later, summer pressed its heat over Atlanta, and the rhythm of the city returned to normal. Traffic roared, clubs filled, cameras followed news stories, and the world kept spinning. But Rasheeda's world had changed for good. She had learned to live at her own pace again. No producers, no scripts, no forced reconciliations. Just mornings with coffee on the porch, afternoons at her boutique, and evenings spent laughing with her sons about nothing at all. Her name still trended now and then, mostly attached to phrases like Rasheeda's redemption era or self-love goals. She smiled whenever she saw them but didn't chase them. She'd spent too many years running for the spotlight, only to realize peace shines brighter when it's quiet. One Sunday, she got a call from Yandy. "Girl, you seeing this?" Yandy's voice carried both amusement and disbelief. "What now?" Rasheeda asked, still folding laundry. "They talking about you for the wrong reason again," Yandy said. "Some blogs saying you and Kirk back together." Rasheeda laughed softly. "They must be bored." Yandy chuckled too. "You know how it goes. If they can't see you crying, they'll make up something else." Rasheeda smiled. "Let them. I don't owe anyone explanations anymore." Later that day, she went to Frost Bistroyes, his restaurant, for the first time in months. Not for nostalgia, for closure. She'd been invited to speak to a small group of young women launching businesses in the neighborhood. When she arrived, heads turned, whispers spread, phones lifted discreetly, but she moved through it with quiet grace. Kirk wasn't there, but his presence lingered in the decor, in the old memories carved into those walls. She took a deep breath and faced it anyway. After her talk, a young woman approached her. "Miss Rasheeda," she said nervously, "I saw your video. It helped me leave a toxic situation. I thought I'd never get out." Rasheeda smiled warmly. "You got out. That's what matters. You don't owe pain another chapter." The girl teared up and nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. Rasheeda hugged her tight, realizing that maybe that was the real purpose behind everything. To turn her own breaking into someone else's blueprint for freedom. When she walked outside afterward, a soft breeze lifted the edges of her hair. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. "Kirk." He looked tired but lighter. "Heard you were here," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "You stalking me now?" He smiled faintly. "Just wanted to say something." She folded her arms. "Make it quick." He nodded. "I watched the event again, the women who rebuild. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I'm proud of you." The words hung there in the summer air. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she looked him in the eye and said, "That means something. Thank you." He nodded again. "I know we can't fix what's broken, but maybe one day, we can at least talk without history yelling in the room." Rasheeda smiled gently. "Maybe one day, not today." And with that, she walked away, her heels clicking softly against the pavement, steady, measured, free. That night, back home, she sat in bed scrolling through photos from the event. Someone had posted a quote of hers that went viral. "I tried to save a marriage, but I ended up saving a woman, and that woman was me." Thousands of comments followed, women sharing their own stories, men reflecting, fans celebrating. She smiled quietly, whispering, "If they only knew how real that line was." She put her phone down and opened her laptop. On the screen was a draft of something new, a project she'd been developing in secret, a docu-series called She Kept Going. It wasn't about fame or scandal. It was about survival, resilience, and starting over. Her voice would narrate the stories of women who had found strength after loss, betrayal, and heartbreak. This time, she wouldn't be the subject, she'd be the storyteller. The cursor blinked as she typed the opening line of her narration. Sometimes the story doesn't end when love does. Sometimes it begins there. She sat back, reread the words, and smiled. This was her purpose now. Not to rehash pain, but to transform it. As the clock neared midnight, she walked out to her balcony again, the skyline glittering like forgiveness. In the distance, fireworks popped faintly, some festival or game she didn't know about, but she smiled anyway. "God," she whispered, "you really turned my tears into testimony." Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her mom. "Proud of the woman you've become." She smiled, typing back, "Me too, Mama." The city below kept breathing. Stories kept unfolding. And Rasheeda finally understood what peace sounded like. It was in silence. It was a heartbeat, steady enough to carry her into whatever came next. And for once, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The past had already learned to rest. Weeks later, the She Kept Going project became more than an idea, it was movement. Filming started in a small studio downtown. The same one where Rasheeda had once cried through her interview months earlier. This time, there were no tears, just strength. She walked onto the set wearing jeans, a white blouse, and a calmness that seemed to anchor everyone around her. The crew adjusted lights while she reviewed her notes. "We ready?" she asked, her tone confident but warm. The director nodded. "Rolling when you are." She looked straight into the camera and began. "This is for every woman who stayed too long, for every woman who loved too much, and for every woman who finally said, enough." This is She Kept Going. Her voice was low, sure, like someone who'd earned her peace the hard way. The first episode featured stories from 3 women: an entrepreneur, a ticker, and a nurse, each with her own version of survival. As they spoke, Rasheeda listened, nodded, sometimes reached out to hold a trembling hand. Between takes, she told the director quietly, "Don't polish their pain, let it breathe. That's where the truth lives." When they wrapped the first day, the crew clapped softly. One of the assistants said, "This feels bigger than TV." Rasheeda smiled. It is. As filming continued, word spread fast. Major networks reached out, sponsors wanted in, and fans flooded her comments with messages like, "This is what healing looks like. And she's changing the culture for real." But through all the noise, Rasheeda stayed grounded. No glitter, no drama, just purpose. One evening after a long shoot, she sat in her car outside Frost Bistro again, not to visit, but to remember. Through the window, she saw Kirk laughing with staff, his shoulders more relaxed than before. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or nostalgia, just distance and acceptance. She whispered to herself. "We both kept going," then drove off without looking back. A few days later, the She Kept Going teaser dropped online. The clip opened with her voice saying, "You can lose everything and still find yourself." It showed flashes of the women she'd interviewed, laughter mixed with tears, resilience woven through heartbreak. In less than 24 hours, it hit 2 million views. The internet flooded with #HashTags She Kept Going, #RASHEEDA rebuilds, #Healing is beautiful. Fans quoted her lines, celebrities reposted her clips, and blogs praised her for evolving beyond the reality TV world. But behind the scenes, she was already planning the next step, a foundation under the same name, offering grants and mentorship for single mothers and women leaving toxic relationships. When her assistant asked why she wanted to do it quietly, she said, "Because real healing don't need headlines, it just needs heart." One afternoon, she met with Yandy and Carly again, this time in her boutique's back office. "Girl, you turning pain into profit?" Carly teased with a grin. Rasheeda laughed. "Nah, I'm turning it into purpose." Yandy smiled knowingly. "You really did it. You walked through the fire and came out gold." Rasheeda shook her head softly. "Nah, I came out human. That's enough." As the weeks passed, She Kept Going aired to critical acclaim. Interviews poured in morning shows, magazines, podcasts, but she chose only a few. When asked how it felt to tell these stories, she said, "It feels like breathing after holding your breath for years." By the final episode, the show had become a phenomenon. The closing scene was Rasheeda sitting alone in the same studio where it began, candle burning beside her. She looked into the camera and said, "Sometimes you don't need closure, you just need courage. And when you find it, you'll realize the story was never about who hurt you, it was about who you became after." The screen faded to black, and her voice lingered in the silence. "I'm Rasheeda. I kept going. And so can you." The credits rolled. Social media exploded. Fans wrote that they cried, that they healed, that they finally saw themselves reflected somewhere. Rasheeda sat at home that night, lights off, TV muted, letting the stillness wash over her. She didn't post, didn't check the views, didn't scroll through reactions. She just sat there, whispering, "Thank you," to God, to life, to every broken moment that built her back up. Later, she stepped outside, barefoot on the cool porch, the night air soft and forgiving. She looked up at the moonbright.com hole, and in that quiet glow, she realized she didn't just survive her story. She had rewritten it. No longer the woman trying to save a marriage, no longer the wife defending her loyalty. Now she was the storyteller, the truth-bearer, the builder, the rebirth. Her journey had come full circle, and as the wind carried through the trees, she smiled and whispered her final prayer of the night. "Thank you for the lesson, not the loss." And just like that, Rasheeda turned off the porch light. closed the door behind her, and stepped fully into her new beginning. Months passed, and she kept going. Became more than a show, it became a lifeline for thousands of women who saw themselves in Rasheeda's story. Community centers began hosting weekly watch groups. Pastors referenced her quotes and sermons about endurance. Even schools invited her to speak on strength and identity. Every time she stood before an audience, she carried that same calm fire, the kind that comes from walking through storms and learning to breathe again. One morning, as she was leaving her boutique, a young girl stopped her outside. She couldn't have been older than 16. "Miss Rasheeda," she said, voice trembling. "I watched your show with my mom. We left my stepdad last month. It was hard, but we're safe now. We're rebuilding." Rasheeda's eyes softened. "You kept going," she whispered, pulling the girl into a hug. "That's what this is all about." The girl nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away smiling. Rasheeda stood there for a long moment, letting that truth sink in. Her pain had planted seeds of courage in strangers. Later that week, her manager called. "We've got news." She kept going, got nominated for a humanitarian award. Rasheeda laughed in disbelief. "For a reality star turned storyteller. Who would have thought?" He replied, "For a woman who changed lives. That's who." The night of the ceremony arrived. She wore a sleek black gown, minimal jewelry, no drama. The red carpet flashed and buzzed, but she moved through it with quiet grace. When her name was announced, the crowd erupted. She walked up to the stage, smiled at the audience, and began, "I never planned to be here. I just planned to survive." Laughter rippled softly. "But God had a bigger plan. I thought I was losing everything when I lost love. Turns out, I was just losing limits." She paused, her eyes shining but steady. "This award isn't for myths, for every woman who thought the end was the end, and found out it was just the beginning." The applause grew until it filled the room, warm and real. She lifted the award slightly and whispered, "For every woman who kept going." After the ceremony, she stepped outside for air, the city glittering under the night sky. Photographers shouted her name, but she waved politely and slipped away to her car. Once inside, she placed the award on the seat beside her and just stared at it for a while. It didn't feel like validation, it felt like closure. A few days later, Kirk called. His tone was calm, respectful, older somehow. "I saw the show," he said, "and the award. I'm proud of you." She smiled softly through the phone. "Thank you." He hesitated. "You ever think we could sit down one day, just to talk about everything, not to fix it, just to make peace with it?" She was quiet for a moment. "One day, maybe, but right now, I'm just enjoying peace without having to explain it." He chuckled faintly. "Fair enough." Before hanging up, he said, "You did what I couldn't do, turned the pain into purpose." She replied gently, "And you still can." Then they hung up. No tension, no regret, just understanding. That weekend, she flew to New York for a guest spot on a talk show. The host asked Rasheeda, "What's next for you?" She smiled thoughtfully. "Honestly, just life. I want to travel, write, build love again someday, but without losing myself this time." The audience clapped softly, moved by her calm certainty. Back in Atlanta, she started outlining her first book, part memoir, part guide, called The Quiet Comeback. Each chapter began with a line from her journals. "Forgiveness is freedom. Peace is not passive. Strength is soft, sometimes." Her publisher said, "This will change people." Rasheeda replied, "It already changed me." By the time autumn arrived, her foundation had opened 2 small centers under the She Kept Going banner, one in Atlanta, one in Memphis. Both offered workshops, childcare support, and safe housing for women rebuilding their lives. She visited often, not for photo ops, but to listen, to mentor, to remind them that their stories mattered. One evening, standing in the doorway of the Atlanta Center as the sun dipped low, she watched a group of women laughing around a table, sharing stories and dreams. One of them looked up and called out, "Miss Rasheeda, we made dinner, come eat." She laughed. "On my way." As she walked toward them, her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "You've come full circle, baby." She smiled, typing back, "Still going." The sky turned gold. The laughter grew, and for the first time in a long time, she felt exactly where she was meant to be, not in front of cameras, not behind walls of strength, but right there, living proof that survival can bloom into something beautiful. The story that began with tears on live television ended here, in quiet joy, surrounded by women who had learned to keep going just like her. And as the last light faded, Rasheeda whispered to herself one final truth. "I didn't just survive love. I learned to love surviving." Listen, if you've made it this far, you already know this story wasn't just about marriage, betrayal, or celebrity. It was about strength. It was about what happens when a woman decides to stop performing survival and actually start living again. Rasheeda's tears started a conversation, but her healing turned it into a movement. And if you've ever sat in silence, wondering if you could rebuild your life after being broken by someone you trusted, this is your sign that you can, because pain doesn't end the story, it rewrites it. Every lesson she lived through became proof that peace doesn't come from perfection. Peace comes from choosing yourself, even when it hurts. And maybe that's why her words, "I tried to save my marriage, but God used it to save me," hit so deep, because no matter who you are, you've probably tried to save something that was already sinking. Maybe it was a relationship, a friendship, or a version of yourself that no longer fits. But if you're still here, still breathing, still hoping, then like Rasheeda, you kept going. And that's power. Think about it. How many times did you forgive someone because you didn't want to lose them, only to realize you were losing yourself in the process? How many times did you smile through pain, thinking that strength meant silence? Rasheeda learned what most of us learn the hard way. Strength is not pretending. Strength is saying, "This hurts," and still choosing to move forward. Her story reminded everyone watching that love doesn't mean tolerance, and loyalty doesn't mean self-sacrifice. So here's the truth. You don't need the world to understand your journey. You don't need an audience to validate your healing. You just need the courage to start. That's what this story was about. Not drama, not scandal, not ratings, just the raw truth of rebuilding from the inside out. If you felt her pain, if you saw yourself in her silence, if you've ever wiped your own tears and whispered, "I'll be okay," then this story was for you. And maybe now, it's your turn to pass it forward. Maybe it's time to call that friend who's still holding on to something that's hurting her. Maybe it's time to remind your sister, your cousin, your coworker, that she deserves peace, too. Because when one woman heals out loud, she gives permission for others to start their own healing quietly. And if you've ever thought, "It's too late for me," hear this clearly: it's not. You are not too old, too tired, too broken, too far gone. Healing doesn't have an expiration date. Every sunrise is proof that you get to begin again. Rasheeda thought her life would end in the shadow of someone else's mistakes. Instead, she turned those shadows into light for others. And now look, she's living proof that heartbreak can become holy ground if you choose to grow from it. This isn't just her story. It's yours too. It's for every person who's ever poured love into the wrong place. For every woman who believed forever meant losing herself. For every man who's learning how to love better after breaking someone good. This is your reminder that it's never too late to choose peace over pain, purpose over pressure, healing over hurt. So if you're watching right now, don't just scroll past this moment. Take it in, breathe. Ask yourself what you're holding on to that no longer deserves your energy. Is it anger, fear, guilt? Whatever it is, let it go. Let go so you can grow. Because somewhere in your future, there's a version of you smiling the way Rasheeda smiles now, free, grounded, unbothered, at peace. And that version of you is waiting for you to catch up. But before you go, do this: hit that like button if you believe in healing. Subscribe if you're ready to keep growing with us. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that love should never cost your peace. And drop a comment below telling us what keeping going means to you. Because every comment becomes a little testimony, a piece of encouragement that might help someone else push through. We want to hear from you. What did this story teach you? Did you see your own reflection somewhere in Rasheeda's journey? Do you believe in second chances, not with someone else, but with yourself? Write it down. Tell your truth. The comment section is more than reactions, it's a community. And every time one of you speaks, another person finds strength to do the same. So let's turn this moment into something real. Let's turn the noise into meaning. Let's remind the world that women like Rasheeda don't just survive, they rebuild, they rise, they rewrite their endings. And if she can do it under the glare of cameras, the weight of judgment, and the pressure of fame, then you can do it in your own quiet way, too. Because no matter how messy it gets, no matter how deep the hurt goes, you can always start again. And that's what this channel is here for, to remind you that there's beauty after the breakdown. That healing isn't weakness, that strength looks different on everyone. Sometimes it's loud and fierce, sometimes it's soft and steady, but it's always real. So go ahead, take that step, start that journal, send that message, forgive that version of yourself who didn't know better. Then breathe, because healing doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be honest. And as you do, remember Rasheeda's words: love didn't fail me, loyalty did. Those words weren't just for her, they were for every person who has ever loved deeply and been let down, yet chose not to become bitter. They were for you, because real power isn't in proving you were right, it's in knowing you're whole, even when life tried to split you in half. So if you're still standing, still learning, still trying, then you're doing exactly what this story is about. You're keeping going. And that's enough. Now it's your turn. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the end of one story is the beginning of another. Like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned because there's more to come. More stories, more truth, more healing. This isn't the end, it's the beginning of something greater. Because like Rasheeda said, the story doesn't end when love does. Sometimes it begins there. And for everyone watching, for every person who's rebuilding piece by piece, remember this: your peace is your power. Protect it, nurture it, and never apologize for choosing it. Because no matter what happens, you're not broken, you're becoming. So keep going. Always keep going.